Hello and welcome to WhatKeepsYouAwake.tv. I'm your host, David Hooser, and you've all met my next guest, Gerald Hennessey, master developer of an AI system to, transform his own real estate business. But he's done things that most of us haven't even thought about. We've heard about artificial intelligence. We know about ChatGPT, and many of us have tried it out. Most, if you're reading, if you're fogging a mirror these days, you've tried something that's AI based. But few of us have done what Gerald has done for his specific need. And I'm going to let him tell us a little bit more about the developmental side of the system that he now implements on a day-to-day basis in his real estate business. So, Gerald, tell us, you started 2 years ago, which most of us were looking at a lot of different things, but not many looking at AI, systems at that time. You started using ChatGPT when it first came out, and you thought, hey, I can use this to address a couple of issues that we have. And so how was that initial experience?
Yeah, so the last time that we met, we talked about how the biggest problem with humans is that we're human.
Yep.
And that human nature kind of rules us. And so we have all sorts of habits and deficiencies that we all face as humans, and some of those things that in the context of a business are having to take bathroom breaks and having to take days off, calling in sick, leaving early, all of these sorts of things, and then even having a bad day.
Okay.
We initially...
Sounds like me every day.
So we got into this with artificial intelligence to try and solve some of those problems.
Okay.
And initially we did. And what we found...
But you used, for example, a third party, the ChatGPT as it was available, presented at the time.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And so it was when we got into the voice AI component that we started realizing that there were 5 different areas or destinations or bus stops along the way that each piece of information has to travel to. And there's a paywall behind each one of those destinations. So for OpenAI, which is ChatGPT, for example, is just the brain of where the actual generation of a response is made.
Right.
But we have, when myself as a caller, when I speak into the phone, my voice has to be transcribed into text.
Yep.
Then that text has to have some set of instructions on how to process it attached to it.
Okay.
Then it goes over to ChatGPT, OpenAI, where it gets processed into a response using the instructions and training that were attached to it. Then a response gets sent back, and that response now has to be converted into a voice, a synthesized voice, as a file. And then that file travels over the voice over IP lines back to where it gets played into your ear.
To me, the initial caller.
That's right.
So it sounds to me like that's a hell of a long time.
Yes, it is. And so there's a word for that, what everybody experiences with these things, and it's called latency.
Latency, okay.
The delay that's inherent in there, because each one of those pieces is a potential point of failure. As a matter of fact, OpenAI, ChatGPT, they have on their own website a schedule of whenever they've experienced any sort of issues or downtime.
Okay.
And they do experience downtime.
Absolutely.
Now, they've done their best to avoid having downtime and having what we call a timeout, where it did not respond within the allotted time that it has set for it. And what they've done instead was that they've placed instructions for their system to push out any sort of response, its best guess at a response, in avoiding that timeout.
So even if maybe it really hasn't given or developed or created the best response, it just says, here's something.
Yeah, here's something. At least we didn't time out. At least we didn't have downtime. Right?
And then you got to, in your own world, kind of filter through that thought is, wait, is this even relevant to the initial question that the caller had?
Yeah, and so sometimes it can be conveyed as gibberish, or that it's just something that's not relevant, or even a mistake, such as, stating a year that, or a date that has a year that's already passed.
And it's kind of hard to explain to this caller who's a prospective investor or client of yours, that my AI agent just had a brain fart.
Right. Had a bad day. We were supposed to be eliminating that by
That's
having
the whole point
right?
of this system, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And so by having all these potential points of failure,
right,
or
delay.
Yeah,
it's not an outright failure, maybe, but it's a slow response.
Yeah. But a response that's not accurate is what we call a hallucination.
Okay.
Right. And we really want to avoid having hallucinations, failures, latency. We want the experience to be as human-like as possible.
Yeah. If you ask my kids, they'll say I have a lot of hallucinations.
You're tripping, Dad.
Yeah, that doesn't relate to anything I know. All right. So this was your initial experience. Now, it was better than, in some cases, the human call center situation. Maybe it's better because there is an answer versus it's not an hour that you cover in one of your shifts. So there's no answer and it goes to voicemail.
That's right.
So at least there's an answer.
So when we look at the call history and records of any particular business, we found that the call answer rates can be as low as 30% of the total calls. So at least by having AI in place, whether it's a primary position to answer all calls, or even if it's as a backup where it captures all the missed calls.
Gotcha.
Either way, we're getting to a 100% call answer rate, which gives us that opportunity to capture.
Gotcha.
Then from there, it's about the conversion of converting a potential prospect into a lead or a client. So we want to capture first, but then we want effective conversations, right? And so the way that we went from there was to remove all these points of failure.
Remove them externally. You still have these same things operating somewhere. You still have to take analog voice to a digital, stream of data to a processor or knowledge base element that's going to kind of come up with the right response, and then you send it right back. You still have to do that.
Yeah.
Whether you're using 5 different servers in the cloud because you're contracted 5 service providers, or you're doing this maybe on your own platform.
That's right.
Okay. So
the way that everybody's using this technology now and why they're still having some of those issues is because each volley of information, somebody saying something on the phone, it is essentially given a bus pass where it has to stop at all these different destinations. So the delay of all those stops, and if any one of those has any sort of delay or failure, whether it's in the transcription or if it's in the synthesizing of the voice, or if it's in the response that the AI brain produces, the large language model, all of those are points of failure. And so what we figured out is that by having instead of paying all these third-party companies to process that information at each bus stop along the way, we just have one stop on one server where everything is processed all at once.
Okay. So you're hosting your own AI now. You are your own AI platform.
That's right.
Okay.
And that's
that solves
to be effective. It solves that problem.
But it creates new ones. I mean, you've got to have a large language model, component in your stack, and that's energy, and that's storage devices, and how much, so how are you hosting this at a data center somewhere? Do you have your own?
That's right. The idea is you have everything in one place.
Okay.
So it's all being processed. It's not having to travel along any sort of bus stop, type of, model. But, nowadays we're experiencing right now the large language model wars, right? They're battling for who has the best.
Yes.
Right? So we had OpenAI that started all this, and it's kind of interesting that people talk about
the newest one, DeepSeek, right?
Yeah, DeepSeek, right? So OpenAI, their name suggests that it was supposed to be open source and the original design, but they kept it.
That's the way Elon wanted it, right?
That's right. And so they did that so that they could have that paywall that they could charge for the usage of their product, right? So, currently it's not possible to use OpenAI on your own server. The only way to use OpenAI is by the bus stop
pinging
method, right?
theirs, right?
Yeah, using their server and waiting for the response to come back. But there are other models that have been open sourced.
Okay.
LLaMA by Meta is one of them. And of course, just in the last week, DeepSeek was released, and they released it open source. And it caused such a disruption in the perception of people that follow this technology that it in one day wiped out 1.5 trillion in equity in the markets.
600 million for NVIDIA.
Yeah. So these companies all took a hit because it was essentially a correction of overvaluation, right? So now they've set the new standard that as far as performance, that's higher, but also open source, so anybody can download this to their local device or to a remote server like we have, and they can utilize it now that way.
Okay.
And so we can expect to see a lot more of this happening, where the next latest and greatest model is going to happen, but the new standard is set for things to be open source.
So your specific AI instance or stack or system, is it focused on marketing and sales type agent positions or functions?
Well, so everything's developing by the day, and we're always adding more features and tech to our stack, right? But you can think about AI as being the brain behind everything, and then automation being the extension of that, the arms and legs of it.
Okay.
Right? So there are a number of automated tasks that can just happen, but with the brain being able to process the information to make that possible.
Sure.
Right. And this will get really advanced when robotics becomes mainstream as early as later this year.
Right. I'm waiting for that robot housekeeper.
That's right.
Coming in on board any month now. My wife is anxiously awaiting.
That's right. And so it's all going to change. They already have it. It's already about to be deployed out to all of us. They say it will be affordable, about as affordable as a car.
Yeah.
And from there, we can expect to see advances in robotics for the trades, as far as construction, plumbing, HVAC, electrical, all that.
Will those be connected to, or they have their own little operating system inside of them that has its own, data stack? That
it depends on the use case and how it can kind of go either way, right?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about driving cars,
because I already Siri and Alexa and all, they already know way too much about me. So I'm not anxious for a robot to come in and start telling the world all the things that go on in my house.
Yeah.
So
a self-driving taxi, for example, would need to have some sort of connectivity to stay updated with GPS and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
And to process payments for rides and all that sort of stuff.
But for mapping my house, that's all you do. I'm not going to clean the neighbor's house. All right. I don't care how many AI bots I get. They're for me. They're going to serve my needs.
That's right.
So you could see that being a kind of a local network focused activity or
there's a lot of people that have concerns about that, right? Because we've seen movies that have depicted robots that can be updated in their software, and now they've turned nefarious against us.
Now my wife gets mad at me and she hits the red button on the robot.
So I think a lot of people are going to want to have something that is everything is all inside the device. It doesn't have the ability to connect to some great server.
So like you've built for your own business, you've got your local stack. Now let me ask you, is there a difference between an agent that serves an inbound purpose function versus an outbound? Because I can tell you, one of the experiences I've had is I tried an outbound application, tried to build it using a third party to meet accounts receivables task or function within my company. And the latency was bad. I mean, the the voice quality was fine once it happened. The responses, we had a lot of hallucinations on the responses. But the biggest issue was latency. I mean, a client would answer, me being the test client, and say, hello, hello, hello. And as I'm hanging up, I could hear the response coming, hello, this is, so I couldn't use it. I couldn't put my customers through that. They see my number. I want them to be happy to answer it, not, oh, geez, is this going to be another one of those 15-second delay, calls from, New Shoes Enterprises. I didn't want that. So tell me how you address the differences in the inbound versus the outbound.
So we're always making improvements, but you're absolutely right that with outbound, most uses out there right now have between the time that somebody says hello, then it makes the connection to the artificial intelligence agent. So there's a good 1 to 3 seconds and a couple of clicks sounds in there that are a dead giveaway that this is an automated
This is not
call,
a human call.
right? This is not a human call.
I get enough of those non-human or interactive voice response calls that so
the key is to have something, a response that plays right away.
Right.
So typically we're working on addressing that with a short recording of, hi, how's it going today?
Gotcha.
While it's connecting in the background. So there's not that silence or clicking sounds in there. But, there's one use case for outbound with existing clients, right? Where we have permission because we've got regulations now that are going into effect and they're ramping up over
government
time.
Compliance.
Especially over the next year, that the regulators kind of have it set in their mind to completely eliminate what we call cold outbound marketing.
Yes. And we were using it for AR, so it was with our existing clients.
Yeah.
So.
And so permission-based marketing for outbound is what it comes down to. And when someone's already a client, we have permission to, communicate with them on an outbound basis. Right. And so that's this year, we should see some really big improvements on that, becoming more realistic. But, with
by the way, on that regulation side, the regulatory side, if you are offering the service and I'm your customer and I'm giving you the database, the CRM components that I want you to start making calls, how do you make sure I have permission to make that outbound call?
Yeah, there's definitely protocols in place that every company should have in place, but the CRM and database would be where you'd track that, right?
Okay.
So, and again, the regulators are increasing the requirements on this. So now they have it set to where there actually has to be a physical opt-in. So that's accomplished with a form on a website that has specific disclosures on there where you check a box and say, yes, I give permission.
So I need to store that. I need to not just capture it somewhere and maybe not just, but I should probably physically screenshot that.
Yeah.
So I have a digital confirmation, but also a physical.
And it doesn't necessarily need to have a screenshot.
Okay.
Because when we have the form connected to the CRM, there's a record of that, right?
Sure.
And it tracks from the IP address.
Sure.
But there's also...
I could easily, find a way to fake that confirmation.
If you already have their IP address. But,
I guess that's the key. Is you're capturing the IP they're connecting with.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's also kind of fair use, right? So if somebody calls our business, they reached out to us.
Absolutely.
Well, then it's fair use we can call them back, right? So
that makes sense.
It's the cold stuff that they're after eliminating.
So you got to warm it up. Got to keep track that they've, opted in to your interactions with them before
they
you start.
Either opted in or they contacted us first, right?
Okay.
Other than that, a lot of businesses now are focusing on inbound marketing, right?
Sure.
And so a lot of companies, businesses will spend money on marketing and advertising, whether that's commercials or social media ads or even, search engine ads and the sort. And what a shame it is for businesses to spend that kind of money and to not be able to capture all of the traffic that comes in from that. So when we're advertising to send somebody to a website and we're expecting that person to fill out a form, as our call to action, a lot of people have had bad experiences, myself included, where I've filled out a form on a website, and then I've had multiple people call me back because that company that
Quote,
website
unquote.
Sold the lead as a lead to multiple companies.
So we're all gun shy.
Yeah, we're all a little hesitant for that now, right? So a lot of people, will avoid filling out a form, and instead they'll just X out of the website. We call that a bounce rate.
Yeah.
Right. So some of the alternatives that we have now, in addition to giving them the opportunity to call or text, is a web chat widget. Right. So a chat window on there where you can have a live chat. Historically, those would be a human sitting on the other end.
Sure.
But we have the ability to connect that to artificial intelligence now.
AI.
So 24 hours a day, someone can have a conversation.
So you kind of have an agent, that serves each of those input formats. So if you got someone emailing you, you have an agent optimized to interact with the email inbound request, or you have a chat bot agent, you have a voice agent. I assume, or
so we train them all with the same, protocols,
Okay.
the same information, and so they're all kind of optimized to what's most important for that business, which is what is the goal and objective to have in each interaction and conversation. Right? So most businesses, we can identify that we want to provide information, answer questions, and then we want to ask questions and capture those answers, and then update the contacts so that we have something to go on as far as follow-up and nurturing that person to become a client.
All right, well, it's good stuff. I'm sure we could go on forever, but we're at our drive time goal for our listeners out there. So everyone, if you have any specific questions, I'm sure Gerald would be happy to entertain those. Just, reach out to us on whatkeepsyouawake.tv, or we'll pop up his URL, his website for contacting him directly. But remember, before you go, like, follow, or subscribe to whatkeepsyouawake.tv, and look for us on a future episode. Thank you.